So for us, as the Club of Rome, we're basically a movement of movements or a network of networks. We bring together economists and scientists, former actually heads of state, and also CEOs. And what's very important for us is to build the bridges between the economic systems change that we're calling for, the financial systems change that's fundamental in order for us to shift from an extractive economy to an economy that services people, planet, and prosperity, and of course build those bridges also out to the private sector, but also to civil society. What's been fascinating for me as co-president, but also my entire career, I've been trying to build those bridges. That's why it's so important to be here at Building Bridges as a conference concept, because it's fundamental. It's fundamental in terms of entering into the realm of the audience that you're trying to bring on board onto that journey of systems change. What we do is we use our economic knowledge, we use actually our new economic models as ways to enable us to show that we can truly shift from an extractive model, whether we're talking to a government and putting forward new indicators for GDP, whether we're talking to civil society and showing them what does this mean for your life and your livelihood, or whether we're talking to industry and showing them, okay, well, this is what transformation looks like. This is how we can truly create an industrial revolution. This is how we can shift from just profit, short-term profit in particular, into something that is much more equitable, back to an economy that services people, planet, and prosperity, and you as industry servicing that economy as well. So it's been a real honor to work directly with the European Commission. I've been working with the institutions most of my career, both the European Parliament and the European Commission. And these two working groups, so the expert group that I chair, the Economic and Societal Impacts of Research and Innovation, first, that particular working group has been an absolute transformational way of thinking, and the way in which we also try to guide the Commission and look at research and innovation. The first thing is that we have to give credit to the DG, the Directorate General for Research and Innovation, that has changed its entire organogram and thinking around people, planet, and prosperity. The way it's organizing its funding, the way it's looking at innovation is now actually targeting people, planet, and prosperity. Within that, we have been working with the European Commission, and in particular DG Research and Innovation, to think through, okay, what does that mean in the poly-crisis? How do we transform in crisis? What does it mean to take into consideration societal and economic impacts within our research funding? But also, what is the new role of universities? Not only as academic institutions that carry out research and innovation for the European Union, but also the role in which we interact actually with students. We had a very young woman who was part of our expert group and who continues to give us advice on, especially through COVID, the new role of universities was actually creating a place where people felt comfortable, not only to learn, but actually to stay safe during a pandemic. And that brings in very different types of societal impacts when you think about the role of a professor or the role of a dean of a university. What is the role of the interaction between governments, all the way from the EU to national governments to cities? We have a cities mission at the European level alongside the climate and adaptation mission. What does it look like to create the bridges between the cities mission and the adaptation mission and research and innovation? How can we create the feedback loops where we bring, for example, triangles of research between our academic institutions, governments, and obviously industry and civil society? So these are some of the outputs that have been really phenomenal. Now, there's another element, which is also the future of work. When we look at innovation and when we think through our twin transition at the European level, which is one to look at sustainability and the other to look at digitalization. And we need to ensure that everything we do in research and innovation is fostering both. We cannot have IT or anything, digitalization, without thinking about its servicing people, planet, and prosperity. And we again cannot think of sustainability in some kind of vacuum as if it's just an ecological pathway rather than thinking through the social impacts. How can we build bridges between both of those areas and create a transition that fosters both, that brings AI and IT back to servicing people and planet, and that also ensures that sustainability is something that we know we can integrate into the future of work and the way in which we remain competitive at the European level without continuing with the same extractive growth models that we have, but new models of well-being. So first of all, I never say yes to joining a board unless I truly believe in the mission of that company. What's been interesting, in particular in those two examples with BMW and also EDP as Portugal's electricity company, has been the way in which EDP has declared that it will absolutely move out of fossil energy by 2030. So it will be 100% renewables and also a supplier and a distributor of clean energy. What I think has been very interesting in my work with EDP is demonstrating that actually a just transition really can work on the ground. EDP has pulled out of the Sines site, which is a coal site, worked with the people who were the coal workers but also linked to that site, and has created a just transition plan where it has given re-employment for all of those people, reskilled, but ensure that the community can continue to thrive. In terms of BMW, we now see that there are very key constraints on the continuation of using the internal combustion engine. And what BMW has declared is that it is shifting very much towards electrification. Now, the problem there is materials use. So my conversation with BMW is great, but I am not one that will be a proponent of replacing one car for another car. Please, you as BMW and also other transport suppliers, can we become mobility suppliers? Can we think through diversifying our portfolio so that we actually are a mobility portfolio rather than a car manufacturer? What does that look like in terms of ensuring that people can go from A to B? What does that look like in terms of the socio and economic impacts? So all of my roles within private sector, first, I try to give as much guidance as possible based on my own background. But what really from that I have learned is that many CEOs, many companies are absolutely thinking about these things. We need to remember that Aurelio Peccei, who actually started the Club of Rome, was an entrepreneur. He was the CEO of Olivetti. In that tradition, we cannot forget that we have enlightened men and women who are actually leading our corporations. What we need to do is remind them that our systems, our economic system is broken. Our financial system is broken. And we are actually going straight into a wall of planetary boundaries. So can we work together collectively to find the right innovative technological and non-technological solutions, new governance models, to actually ensure that, yes, we continue to have an industry which is Industry 5.0 that takes into consideration, again, that twin transition of social, environmental, and also, obviously, of digitalization and new innovation within AI. So Quel Monde pour Demain was actually a French-Belgian book. We published it with two of our climate activists, Hanouna and Adélaïde Charlier, as well as with Princess Esmeralda of Belgium. That book already set a tone of intergenerational dialogue. So one of the big calls within the book is we have to have that intergenerational dialogue. We need to discuss with the youth what we have learned, both in terms of our successes and our failings. So one of my key recommendations from that book has been that we have to enter into more precise dialogues with different generations in order to take into consideration their views as we build a new civilization. Earth for All, a survival guide for humanity, very much builds on that. It builds on the fact that we all have individual responsibilities. But at the end of the day, I must say, and we need to remember that the carbon tracker that was actually set up by BP, which pretty much is a carbon calculator of each of us individual emissions, was done very interestingly as a strategic way to bring back the responsibility to citizens. Although I do believe that we're all addicted to growth, I also believe that our addiction is fostered by a fossil fuel energy industry, which is very much continuing to push that addiction based on fossil energy, that we have governments that are not actually fulfilling their leadership to service people, planet, and prosperity. We as citizens have to hold our governments accountable. We as citizens have to hold our corporations accountable. We as citizens absolutely need to try what we can to move out of mostly a variety of different areas, for example, shifting our mobility patterns so that we have less of an impact, seeing where we actually can use less of the vehicle, if we can purchase an electric vehicle, but pushing our governments to give us more rail options so that we can go from A to B, ensuring that we do recycle, that we upcycle, that we consume less, moving into, obviously, regenerative agriculture and asking that organic and regenerative agriculture is not as costly, but making sure that our governments are promoting those types of agricultural practices so we don't have subsidies to industrial agriculture, but rather to regenerative agriculture. And shifting, yes, to a plant-based diet, but taking into consideration that actually in many countries, grazing, as long as it's regenerative grazing, is very healthy. So that doesn't mean we cut out all of our proteins. We also have to think that a plant-based diet can also be very negative. If we have too much soya or too many almonds, for example, that are depleting our bee population in the United States, we have to think about these complexities. But we must call upon our governments to put in place the legislation that enables us to have the right options and that also takes over their responsibility at servicing people, planet, and prosperity at the same time.